Hello and welcome to the first preseason episode of the MLS Fantasy Insider Podcast for the 2019 MLS season, aka our fantasy preview of the Eastern Conference. This episode is brought to you by the Pablo Picasso Jersey Company, exclusive provider to MLS since 2019. Oh, wait, no. Actually, this episode is brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the amazing Patreon community that helps support MLS Fantasy Insider. I'm your host, Reed Conley from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and tonight I'm joined by our classic co-host team, Mike Denton, Blaine Riffle, and rejoining us fresh back from a season-long loan, Jason Wiskovich. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well, Reed.
Doing very well.
Hello, friends.
There it is, right there. I'm also excited to say, give a little early welcome to Ben Baer, who we will be featuring later in the podcast. He joined us earlier this week to chat some about the upcoming fantasy game, and now that everything has gone live, this podcast is dropped, and so you'll get to hear a little bit from him, some of the background and the reasoning and what was hoped with these changes, plus some answers to some burning questions that you may have had from the beginning of the season. So coming up should be a lot of fun. Guys, are you ready for this? The season, it's back. Are you ready?
Preach, brother.
I am ready.
I'm preaching. Now, I'm sure every veteran fantasy manager knows that for the past several years, there have been significant changes to the fantasy game just year to year. I'm happy to say that 2019, that is not the case because very little has changed. However, I still think it is stuff that you need to pay attention to because it will be maybe even more impactful sometimes than at first glance. So as I mentioned, we spoke with Ben earlier in the week about just the game and how he's hoping it's going to play out and some of what led to this current version. And we're going to drop that in and play it for you right now. So here it is. All right. Hey, Ben, we appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. We're ready to talk about fantasy. I hope you're ready to talk about fantasy.
Oh, I'm always ready to talk about fantasy. I've been waiting. It's been a long 4 or 5 months since the end of the season for fantasy.
It's been long, but yet it seems like it's gone so fast at the same time.
Yes.
So before we get into the few details about what's new, I just wanted to know if you could pull back the curtain a little bit and just let us and everyone listening know some about the process that goes into for working up the changes in between the seasons and what your goals are for 2019.
Well, I think I mentioned this previously, but this year we were kind of looking to stay pretty the same. We were looking for continuity. That was the main goal. We've changed around a lot of stuff over the past few years. We've done a lot of different changes. We changed, our partner last year, and some issues at the beginning of the season. And so this year, our main goal was, look at it and just, we want continuity. We want to make sure that the game is good for 100% of users, and that's kind of what we were looking at. It was more about looking at things that we can improve for everyone, not necessarily like little tweaks here and there that some people like, some people may like, some people may not like. It's more about making the entire game one that 100% of the people will see the effects of what we're trying to do, the little tweaks here and there in terms of the little bit of user interface, user experience, all that good stuff. That's really where we were kind of focused this year.
So I think the easiest change for us to talk about first, the littlest one as well, is the player maximum per team has been reduced from 4 to 3 players. So that seems pretty straightforward. I think people may just gloss over this one like it's nothing, but I really do think this will cause fantasy managers to have to think about where they want to spend that third spot on if they're not going to double up with a keeper and a defender or how that's going to work. So was this motivated by feedback, or is this just a way for you and Bobby and Doyle to keep Weeby from being in the game?
Well, there's always a little bit of the second one into any change we do. It was a little bit of feedback. I think, the feedback was based on that we kind of based this off of was, that a lot of people thought that too many lineups were the same, that they were facing an opponent who had the same lineup as them or something really close. And that comes down to, especially towards the end of the season, when you have Atlanta playing San Jose and everybody has 4 Atlanta players. And then you have, let's say, another game that week, let's say the Red Bulls are facing Colorado, and everyone's 4 Red Bulls players. So basically, you're looking at 8 players on every team that's the same. So no, just maybe loosening it up a little bit. 3 players you'll have beaten, but there will be little different opportunities here and there. Little more strategy comes into play, and I think ultimately we'll see some lineup diversity a little bit more this year.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think it will be hard, and will allow some flavor of the teams for doubling up on a forward and midfielder, or going defensive with the keeper and the defender. I think that will be fun.
Exactly.
Now the big change. So I was really excited to hear that the price change system was getting a little bit of an overview. That was a big focus of the early part of the season last year, and it was something I know a lot of people were talking about in their feedback. So can you tell us a little bit more about what the design goal was for the price change system, and how players should see that play out over the season?
Yeah, I think first of all, we didn't do a great job communicating how the prices were going to change going into last season. It wasn't something that we really communicated all that well, and I think over time people got it. It was pretty understandable how it kind of worked, and people started being able, especially the hardcores like you guys and me, that we were able to kind of game the system, increase our budgets maybe artificially a little bit. And I think, what that last sentence I just said is maybe we're trying to get away from. We're trying to make sure that people can't artificially game the system like that. If a player had a really good good game 3 weeks ago, he scored 12, 13 points. You probably know he's going to score. His price is going to raise. And that, led to maybe some budgets, increasing and maybe not the way they should. So that's kind of one thing we kind of looked at. So, I think that's going to be something that that impact is going to be less. You're not going to be looking at some guy from 3 weeks ago that did a really good game. It's going to be more focused on recent performance. That's what we're really focusing on. And then we're kind of looking at is maybe the prices are rising and falling, kind of feeding into what I just said, but in a way that maybe that wasn't always understandable. And, maybe a player goes up 0.5 in a week where you don't really understand why. And I think we kind of, softened that a little bit, just a little bit. I don't think you'll notice too much, but we did soften a little bit. Maybe the peaks and troughs are a little bit shallower than they were last year.
So, Mike, you'll still be able to do some theory crafting here.
I'll hopefully will be. Well, Ben, let me ask you this. I know when we interviewed you last season, or at the end of last season, you talked about hopefully being able to do some more testing to see how the price change system would play out. Were y'all able to do a lot of testing to see how this system plays out, and what did you see from that testing?
Yeah. So again, when we were looking at it, this was definitely something that we were looking at going into the season. That was probably the main thing that we were kind of looking at. Again, the main goal was continuity, but outside of that, the one change that we knew we wanted to look at was definitely the price changes, and we gamed out everything. We worked with our provider, and we had a ton of different options, and we compared it to what it was last season and what it'll look like this season. We have a few different options that we're looking at to really dig into how this is going to affect the game. And ultimately we kind of came to unanimous decision among about 4 or 5 of us that were involved. And we came to unanimous decision that this is where we're going to go with. And I think you'll see the difference, but it's not too much of a change. It's like we're not going back to what it was before, but it is a little bit of a change, and I think it'll help the game.
The old average system.
Yeah.
Just something else I want to make sure everyone knows, just day one, hours into the game. Last season, there was some confusion into the exact split between spring and fall, just miscommunication at different levels. So I just wanted right now for everyone to get it straight from the Bears' mouth. Just be sure we know, when is that split?
The split this season is coming with the Gold Cup break. So it'll be a little earlier this year. We're looking at March 2nd to June 8th for the spring season, and then June 22nd through October 6th, decision day for the fall season. It's obviously the season's also ending a few weeks earlier, so that's why it may seem like it's really early, but maybe just like 2 or 3 game weeks. You'll see it'll be a little bit earlier than it was last year.
So there we go. Everyone mark that on your calendar. That's when you can go. Everything's going to switch back. It's just like last year. The prices will reset. There'll be a small adjustments, right, Ben? Just like last year, there are a few players that got.
Yeah, there's always the Alfonso Davies, who started that as what was he, 6 last year?
Something like that.
That was a mistake. So, but I'm not going to be too hard on myself. But there's always those little things that you want to see. Maybe Paxton Pomykal becomes the next Mauro Diaz, and he'll have to be a 10.0 player instead of a 6.
Now, you guys really cranked up your game last year with some of the fantasy content. I know you and Doyle and Bobby got really into it with those little live sessions that you guys had. Give you a chance to toot your own horn right now. Do you guys have anything new in the pipeline for what people can expect as far as fantasy content, official content from MLS?
Yeah, you can go over to MLSsoccer.com right now. There is a 15-minute long video that features the three of us, some banter, some parts that maybe you guys will not enjoy because it's for the beginners. It's kind of introducing the game, but then we'll get into the nitty gritty, start ripping each other for terrible picks and all that good stuff. But then, there's that video. Well, there's different clips going in different places. You'll see it all over the place. The big news is that we actually have a name for the show this year. Instead of calling it the MLS Periscope podcast is what we kind of went with that at some point. But this year we are Fantasy United FC is the name of the show.
I like it.
We went with awesome. It's a little bit, little inside joke for the hardcore MLS fans, but we liked it. We as Doyle said, we kind of didn't go with Fantasy Wednesday, Evergrande, Real United. we didn't go with that. We went with Fantasy United FC. I'm a little hurt though. I wanted to go SC, but we figured lean into the FC thing. So we have that, and that we'll have a weekly show. We're not doing 2 shows this year, mostly not because we don't want to, but because all the double game weeks, there's not really going to be much point to do 2 shows because we're going to just bang it all out this year.
So many Wednesday games this year too.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, after the first 5 or 6 weeks, basically every week is a double game week. So we were looking at the schedule and I was like, does it really make sense to even plan on doing 2 shows? And we said, no, not really. Maybe we'll come back later in the week every now and again. Maybe a little bit less, maybe here and there, but mostly, we're going to focus on that main show on Tuesdays. It'll be a little higher production values, not terribly high, but a little higher. It's going to be fun.
Excellent. I love it. I think you should just have like an outro video of just Weeby sitting at his desk not playing fantasy.
Well, I'll tell. I mean, there's definitely a dig at Weeby in that video, so you'll find it.
Oh, we're gonna love that. Gonna love that. I've got one more question, and I'll see if these guys have anything else for you. Let you talk about anything else you want to. A few weeks ago, though, you had a little teaser out on Twitter, and you said, "Should Piatti be a midfielder or a forward?" Let you know, and then you quickly came back and said, you already know what the answer is, and there's only one answer, but you're just curious. We now know that answer, that it's a midfielder.
Yes.
What was the reasoning?
Man, this became like a whole thing, even like in the office that day. It was like, our various Slack channels where I was asking, when I was going through the pricing and the positioning, I would throw out like random ones if I was like stuck on something or, some guys are tougher than others, but when you're looking at all these wingers, it's like tough because, some teams have they'll announce a winger as a forward or as a midfielder. Generally, I do think we stick pretty close to what the team announces or the team has listed on their stuff. Most of the time those guys are midfielders, but I think it's also, there's different circumstances. Houston, like Elise and Kyoto, those guys are forwards. Like they play as high up as Manotas does. So most of the time. So there's also differing views, but like, in a 4-2-3-1, I don't know. It's like, it's tough, but I think ultimately when you keep them as midfielders, it helps the game a little bit more. I think it adds a little more diversity to the lineups, and then I think sometimes if you're looking at the wingers, maybe they'll get shut out of the forwards because you're looking at, every week you're going to have Joseph, BWP, Rui Diaz, why can't I think about it? But Rooney, like all these guys, all these big names that you're going to want in your lineup, and the wingers kind of get shut out. When you move into midfielders, you have guys like Ladera, Morales, attacking mids. But there's only, a few defensive midfielders that are really you're going to want on your team that you're going to every week. And I think we saw a little bit, maybe a little bit of a drop off in using D mids last year. I think because maybe the D mids weren't as good. I don't think it's anything to do with problem in the game, but it's just there weren't as many guys getting 5-6 points on average that you could really look to. Look at a guy like Dax, he was at 3, I think 3 or 4, and you used to want him at 5 or 6. So you only had D mids and attack mids. So if you put all the wingers at forwards, you're losing out, I think, in the midfield, and I think you're not going to use them as your forward. So I think we kind of shifted towards looking at. I think it's better for the game if they're midfielders for the most part. Again, I'll say Elise and Kyoto; those guys are forwards. Like I will argue with anybody about that, but I think Piatti. I know Doyle got heated at me. Even like
I was going to ask who was team forward.
Well, no, you guys might have seen it. He was like on Twitter going at me, but like even in private, he was really going at me. He's like just he's. If there's anybody, there's anybody that's a forward, it's him. And I wasn't so sure. I don't think he plays as high as Luis and Kyoto. But I think there was definitely some good arguments. I think most of the people did say it's better for the game if they're midfielders for the most part.
Oh yeah, I think that's where it gets a lot tougher to decide who's going to be those 5, because when you get somebody as a forward, you go, oh, I can all of a sudden just sneak an extra guy in there. I think what was it? Vela was a midfielder. Wasn't someone happened with LAFC last year that someone started out, I think, as a forward and then got changed, and I was like, crap. I think I changed Vela from a forward to midfielder mid-season. I think that's what I did. It's tough to remember all these different little things. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard.
Ben, you mentioned that 15-minute video you were going to do that's mostly geared towards the beginners, at least in the beginning. What other plans does MLS have to promote the game, especially with all these new markets? I mean, I know like Reed is an FC Cincy fan, and they're going to need some team that scores goals, so why not their fantasy team? How do we get that message to them?
Yeah, I think I think we're still kind of in the planning stages. We still have a week away from the season here, but we're definitely looking out to the clubs. A little outreach, I'll be hitting all them up to make sending them stuff to to ways to highlight the game, and in terms of what we're gonna do, we'll have the video, we'll promote it more. That video there's gonna be higher production values, as I said, so you may see it live on the site and not just on social this year. We'll have the rankings. Reed's gonna be doing something a little bit different for us this year, as you'll see. So I think that maybe will help grow the community a little bit, and maybe add a personalized touch to sometimes when you look at fans playing MLS fantasy, they may not have a ton of people they know that are doing so. It may feel like you're just out there in the wilderness by yourself. So I think maybe personalizing that a little bit, and that goes along with what the show. I think that bringing people in and making them feel like they're not by themselves, and I think that's kind of what you look at when we look at the attrition rate throughout the season. I think the same is true for every fantasy game. I know I used to fall away from fantasy baseball team in July, but so I think that helps maybe with the attrition rate that we see. If you get more people involved and more people involved for longer, I think in the long run you're going to see more the increase in the user base.
Yeah, Ben, I was going to ask you, is there going to be any type of publicity for fantasy, like either via teams tweets, maybe like commercials, or even on the actual pitch, on the LED boards on the sides, things like that?
I'll say, if you were watching the last half of last year, I think you saw, on the LED board, you saw MLS Fantasy. So I think that's going to continue this year.
Yeah.
And we're heavily promoting our app as we always do, and I think fantasy is one of the 3 or 4 bullet points that's in every PowerPoint or deck, whatever you call it, that I see internally. So I think it's definitely a big push in terms of what we do with our app, and I think that's how we promote it. And to me, that's the best way to do it, because I know for years, obviously, people are complaining about the app. There's nothing in that. So one of the main reasons to have the app, and I think that everyone knows that, and that's really the way we're going to push the game.
That sounds awesome. Looking forward to it. And of course, if you guys are some of the ones who listen and have swag, feel free to wear it. Like I've got my cool fantasy hat that my wife got for me. I'll be rocking at the home opener for FC Cincinnati. So listen to that, guys. Tweet your teams. If you're listening right now, tweet your teams and ask them questions about fantasy too.
Well, I didn't even mention this. So we do have a share button this year. So you're going to be automatically. There you go. Finally, right? No more screenshots.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
We just have to sign into the app with our Twitter login so that you'll have access to it.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at my DMs.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but yeah, no. Yeah, finally. We get what? So you'll be able to easily share your lineups. And it's going to the actual game, it's going to look, it'll be a nice little field view. It'll be great.
It's awesome. That's very cool. Looking forward to it. Well, that's all that I have, guys. And if you have any more questions for Ben? All right. Well, thank you so much, Ben. If there's anything else you want to say, just let us know right now. If not, thank you so much for coming out tonight.
I think we're good. If if anybody has any questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter. Not too many questions, but I'm a little busy the next couple of weeks. But you could always hit me up if you have any questions about the game. And then definitely hit up Bobby and Doyle for any questions. So
that'll be fun. We will. We'll be reaching out to Bobby.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So yeah, that's all I got. I think that's it. I think I'm excited for this season for so many ways, and this is one of the main reasons.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, good luck to you guys too. I'm gonna be better this year, I promise.
No, just tell Weeby to be better. I think we'll be good.
All right. Thanks again for Ben joining us. That was some pretty good stuff. Did you guys like that? Did you like the interview? That was helpful.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. I think we're headed in the good direction to start the season.
I think it's safe to say that our favorite non-game mechanic change, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, is the share your team button.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's very helpful, especially last year where you're like doing 2 screenshots. So, we've got a positive, at least something to.
Yeah, Frankenstein screenshot.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean,
it was supposed to be funny, but it wasn't.
Everybody's talking. That's crazy. It's like we've never done this before.
All right, we good now? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll move the mic a little bit closer. Yeah, it's a lot better than last year where we had to do multiple screenshots. So, at least fantasy managers who weren't happy with last year have something to look forward to this year.
Well, now, Jay, you actually played last year still. Were you as committed as you were in the past?
Yeah, I wouldn't say as committed just because of, work and baby and all that stuff. But, I was still definitely committed. I'll say the app absolutely helped because the interface on that was really good. If I only had 10 minutes to do that or to do the lineups, I could just go on there instead of having to wait for Internet Explorer to load and all that good stuff. But, the app, I think, is especially with the screenshot or the screen sharing on there is going to be a big step up.
All right. Well, let's get on to the other big segment of our podcast tonight, one of the 2 segments that we're doing tonight, and that is our Eastern Conference Fantasy Preview. So we're just going to go through everything ETR style, and we're going to do 5 minutes per team. I'll let the guys just chat in general. If you guys want, I can just pick someone to go first, and then at the very end, I'll kind of wrap things up with my fantasy grade for the team, which, I guess if these guys want to fuss about that too, they can do that as well. So let's kick things off with Atlanta United. And Mike, how about you get it started?
Sure. Atlanta United, for as big of the changes they are, most of the team really isn't all that changed. We have a report that it seems like Nagby is staying as of right now. So assuming that is the only big absence are the coaches and Almiron. Now those are pretty big absences or big changes. But Atlanta United spent the money. They've bought Pity Martinez to replace Almiron. Indications so far preseason are that he's pretty talented, pretty good, going to be able to link up. But that's the big question for them is whether or not Pity Martinez can reestablish the connection with Joseph Martinez that Almiron had. Because if they do, then it's going to be just like last year. You're going to want to have Pity Martinez and Joseph Martinez on your team every time that Atlanta plays a home game, regardless of the opponent, regardless of what their budget is, and you can fill out the rest of it later. The other thing is moving from Tata Martino to DeBoer. I think DeBoer has more of a pressing style than Tata did, so we'll see how that affects things and whether that slows down the offensive output. But I don't see anything that's really going to change it. I mean, you weren't really generally picking Atlanta defenders anyway, and especially with the move from 4 to 3, you're going to want to have Pitti and Joseph on your team anyway. So you're probably going to be less likely to take an Atlanta defender anyway. Try to see about maybe Barco or Villalba, depending on who ends up winning that spot. You're going to go with Atlanta offensive players, not as much defensive players, unless it's like a double game week with something weird going on. If they play like FC Cincinnati at home, that's.
Hey, you got to watch out. We've got the defenders. We've got them all.
That's what I'm saying. You're going to want to have the defenders who are playing FC Cincinnati. You're not going to want to have the offensive players. I do have to say my favorite part of this offseason was watching Reed slowly realize that FC Cincinnati was going to be terrible, and then him talking to himself into over the past month that they're actually going to be okay and make a dead for a playoff spot.
I said that 8th is likely, maybe 7th. Maybe.
But yeah, I mean, back to Atlanta for now. They're probably going to win. I mean, the biggest thing for if you're new to MLS, new players, they're in CCL. So we saw this last year. You may not want to pick up their players right off the bat because we're going to see probably a lot of rotation, a lot of, just kind of going through the motions as they focus their games on the Champions League. That's the only concern, like right off the bat. But I mean, once they're done and assuming they're healthy and they don't get beat up like Toronto did, they're going to be one of the best teams in the league, if not far away the best.
All right, so we got some prices here now. We're seeing Martinez 11, Pitti Martinez 10.5, Joseph Martinez 11, Brad Guzan 6, LGP Gonzalez Perez that is 6.5. Pretty high marks up there. Blaine, Jason, you guys think this is worth it?
I think you're leaving out the most integral part of Atlanta, which is the man, the myth, the legend, Breck Shea. At 5.5.
5.5 Shea.
Yes. Him, I also think that, we haven't talked about a very big part of them, which is, you may have just said it, but Julian Gressel. I don't think you said him, but.
No.
Not 9.5.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that is a little high, but, I think he'll be good for double-digit assists this year again if he plays on the wing.
Yeah, I was looking through the numbers on this one, and pretty much anybody I was looking at possibly picking up in a draft league early on or just throughout the season, the guys that I played last year, 8.5 and up, except for the defenders, and their defense is actually kind of reasonably balanced now. LGP is still up there near the top, but Parkhurst has come down a little bit. So if you trust their defense on those certain games, that could be good there. But their offense, I mean, they got priced probably appropriately for where they were last year, and that's going to price out 3 attacking players on a lot of teams early in the season. So just a lot of fun there. And Jay, this is scary because we're on the same wavelength. I was going to bring up Breck Shea as well. We're talking about 2 different things with Atlanta here. Either Breck Shea is going to revitalize his career right here, or he's just going to be the locker room cancer and as lazy as he has been everywhere and really bring this team down. I don't know which one we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we'll be seeing a lot of super sub Breck Shea with a 89th, 90th minute goal. And if you're lucky enough to have him on your bench.
Right, that's your 5 minutes. Cut off. Hard right there.
I was just going to talk about the triple switcheroo. Come on.
Sorry, that's it. You guys almost got that just perfectly. Fantasy grade for me, a lot of solid options at every position with Atlanta, and even some decent secondary options as well at a little bit lower price, but the prime ones are priced highly. They get a solid A for Atlanta. Moving on. No fussing? Okay, we all agree on A. Moving on, Blaine, do you want to talk a little bit about Chicago, or do you want to let Jay do that?
Jay, how much do you like Chicago? Because being a Kansas City fan, they are not high on my list.
I love the city. I'm really not too familiar with a lot of stuff that's going on. I just know Katai killed it for me last year. I believe they got ousted, which I'm not too sure with their defense how good they're going to be defensively. I know, like I just mentioned, they got ousted. I know they got rid of I can't think of his name, the center back.
Vincent.
Yeah.
Vincent retired,
Vincent
and then
retired.
Kappelhoff went somewhere else.
Kappelhoff
Right.
left. They had another guy retire,
Wait,
I
no.
think.
Campbell.
No, Kappelhoff is
Campbell left.
Campbell,
But
that's what I'm
I think we
thinking.
got
Campbell
that.
left. Kappelhoff is still here.
Gordon retired. Vincent retired. So those were a couple of guys that helped him out, especially Gordon near the end. Campbell, his option was declined. DeLu was declined as well. Sorry, Jay Ura was also declined as well there. And then Matt Polster was out of contract. So not a whole lot, in my opinion, has really changed over there at Chicago. They've still got that core group of players that they were trying to build upon last year's Feinsteiger, Katai, McCarty, Nico are all over there. It was that defense that really hurt them. How many times did we see last year center back Schweinsteiger? That's not what we want. That is not what Chicago wants as a team. And so they have made some attempts to help do that. They've brought in Marcelo from Sporting CP. They've brought in David Alstead to help out with defense right there, and then the goal, that whole defensive unit. So that's where it's all going to really rely for Chicago is, can that defense hold out enough for someone like Katai and Nico and Schweinsteiger to be able to get that creativity going, get that pressure going, to be able to do something, to be able to do anything. And I'm just not sure about that at this point right now.
Well,
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Yeah, one name you haven't mentioned yet, and that's Jordy Mihailovic.
That's what I was
strong.
Yeah, me too. Me
Come
too.
on,
I mean, I gotta let
for
you
the
guys
national
talk.
team. Coming on strong for the national team this offseason. A young guy with a lot to prove here, and a team that is really ripe to have a playmaker come in and take over. I mean, I know Schweinsteiger's there, but he's been playing more of a support role. They've promised not to play him in the back, but I don't see him wanting to step up and lead this team like that. I think he's looking for somebody else to do it. And the rest of the guys on the list, as much as we like Nico and Katai as fantasy options, I just don't think they've really stepped up and been able to lead this team offensively. McCarty's trying to cover for that defense, and he's going to have a hard time of it again this year, I'm sure. So, yeah, Jordy's going to be the guy I'm watching there. Price point's coming in at 8 to start the season, which isn't terrible for a 10 who could make that jump into being one of the elite players or close to an elite player in MLS this year.
Yeah, it's amazing price for a 10. I mean, if it works out and he plays like he did with the national team, especially, I mean, we've seen Nikolic being able to produce when he gets the service. So if Jordy can provide that service, that's going to be a great cheap option for fantasy managers.
Yeah,
really, guys, both of them.
No, I mean, their pricing is great. You already mentioned some of that. Jordy's at 8, Nico's at 9, Kappelhoff is the most expensive defender at 6. So, I mean, Nico's the most expensive player on the team at 9. So there are definitely a lot of value options at Chicago if their form goes in the right direction.
I'm not touching that defense with a 10-foot pole. I don't care.
I'm not saying you should. I am not saying you should do that at all. I'll go ahead and give you my grade for Chicago. They have a lot of known options at every position, but none are really standouts, especially with their current form not really rising in the right direction. I guess rising is the only direction it can go, so it's not going in the right direction at all. So I give Chicago a C-. Maybe I should have just given them a solid C because of Jordy and see where they go, but that's what it is. I give them a C- because I just don't know what's going to happen with them. We got finished early on that one. That one's great. All right, let's move on to FC Cincinnati. I will let you guys talk about this first instead of me since I started Chicago. If you guys want to just jump in and do that. I'll let
they're bad.
Go ahead. Like, just be brutal. Be brutal. Do it. FC Cincinnati. Go.
I mean, look, if you're looking for defenders or defensive midfielders, load up on FC Cincinnati because pretty much everyone on their team is a defensive midfielder.
True.
They're really interesting. They kind of remind me of what I'm expecting if it goes well for them is them to be like the Rapids maybe 2 years ago, where they would play a bunch of low scoring games, get a bunch of 1-1 draws, and just kind of linger in the playoff race where they're not eliminated, but nobody seriously takes them seriously except their own fans. That's kind of what I'm thinking here. they're probably going to score a bunch on set pieces. So as a New York City fan, I fully expect them to like win 5-0 at Yankee Stadium, because they're going to have players like Waston, Adi, a bunch of other tall guys. I think Greg Garza's already been hurt for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no one who's going to provide service to Adi. I don't really see Darren Maddox being enough of an offensive threat. So, I mean, the question is going to be whether or not this defense can really hold up. They have enough defenders and defensive midfielder, but with no threat really going forward and not much of a counterattacking threat that I can see, I just think they may just get pummeled and end up losing a lot of games like 2-0.
I could see Lamar really whipping in a lot of crosses like Shea Salinas did, 3-4 years back to Fernando Adi. I think that's, to me, Lamar would be the only person that I would pick from Cincinnati just because his price point at 7.5. I think that could be a pretty good shout.
Yeah, guy I'm looking for along that same line is Fatai Lashe coming over from San Jose. I think he was really underutilized in San Jose and never got to realize his full potential with an MLS club. Price point really doesn't matter. I mean, he's 5.5. I just think if they can get him worked into the lineup properly, I think he can be another asset piece or another assist piece like Lamar, who can really help open up the field for some of their bigger guys. But I want to use this joke. I had a couple of British friends a few years back describe MLS to me as championship level offense with pub level defense. And FC Cincinnati's really tried to put together the best of the best in defense in MLS. And they're going to get steamrolled by all those powerhouses in the East. And we're talking about Atlanta not having the defense, but just going out and scoring goals. That's kind of a growing trend. Same with Chicago. And I know we're going to say it a few more times. Teams are designed to score goals in MLS. They're not designed to stop goals. And I don't think this defense can stop what's been built in the East.
Though a lot of those big teams in the East have lost some of their big producers of goals and assists that have helped with that. So I don't disagree. Let's talk about pricing right now. Adi is the most expensive player right now at $9 million right there. So if for some reason you do start wanting to go for a Cincinnati play, if you think there's a good defensive matchup or something, definitely a lot of value in this team. Waston is only at 6 as far as defense goes. The real gem that I think you might be able to find something here, if there's one position that might be able to help somebody from FC Cincinnati, it's going to be Titan at the goalkeeper position. He's $5 million at a goalkeeper. There's not often a huge point differential between your highest scoring 6.0 goalkeeper and someone in the 5 or 5.5 range. So that could be a potential pick up from FC Cincinnati, especially if they do hold this defensive formation, especially early in the season when teams really may not have that offensive power going for them yet. I will counter one thing and say, I mean, you've got Adi, you've got Maddox, you've got Kakuna Mane, maybe right there. Also got Powell and Garza when they're healthy. So there are some options there, but you're very much right. It is an offensive or a counterattacking focused team looking at that 3-5-2 formation most likely. If you guys, unless you want to bash it some more, I've got my grade for Cincinnati.
No, and one of the nice things I will say is because they have so many defenders and defensive midfielders, that uncertainty as to which ones will get the starting position is kind of priced into it.
Yeah.
So you are getting a little bit of value. So especially early in the season, if the defense does look like it's going to be good, it's going to be a pretty cheap entry point, and you're going to need something like that. So FC Cincinnati probably keep in mind.
Especially if Garza does not play, you might be able to find a very cheap option in Smith at 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. They've got 6 players over 6 million, 7 players at 6 million or higher. I mean, that means 3 players at 5.5 or less have to start.
Time is up. I'm not playing favorites. I will do it for Cincinnati as well. Final thoughts for my grades. A lot of question marks around this team. And if I take off my orange and blue glasses, I have to say that the defensive heavy options are differentials at best and long shots at worst. C-. Too generous? No? Would you guys give them a D or an F?
I'd probably give them a D.
Yeah,
I'm just because if
it's a C-.
works, like they could be a B. If their defense doesn't work, they're an F.
I got a little generous for some people. I'd give him pluses and minuses, so we'll see how that flushes out. Let's move on to Columbus. Jason, you want to talk to us about
Wait, are we
Columbus?
supposed to have the pricing? Jay, you're tweeting out pictures of the pricing.
Not of the exact pricing. It's just a picture of the pricing, but without the pricing. So it's okay.
There should not be no pricing.
No, there's no pricing on it. It just says fantasy pricing with the teams, but there's no pricing, so they can't see it.
Talk to us about Columbus.
Yes, Columbus Crew. Oh, wow. I actually I think that, with Berhalter's departure and Caleb Porter's I guess signing there, I actually think they're going to be really good. I mean, they've looked pretty decent in preseason. Zardes has looked much better. I think he's a great option at 9.5 like he was last year. I would love to see Pipa do well again this year. I think I picked them 2 years ago to be my dark horse. And I think that they will have a resurgence, I guess you could say, this year with Caleb Porter at the helm. A lot of their defenders are still there. Their midfield is very, very much intact. I think it's, you still got Stefan for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think about half the season. He's leaving in the summer.
Yeah, and then they may just loan him back, depending. But I foresee them, definitely making the playoffs again this year. I think that barring any major injuries, I think they're going to be a very solid contender in the East. For fantasy wise, defensively, they're all still stacked up pretty heavily on price. All pretty premier options. Again, it's still obviously too early to tell, but I do think that Pedro Santos coming in at 7 mil. I think it's a really good shout. Depending on how Merrim does, him being back at 7.5, if he can earn his spot and get his head in the right spot, I think that he could be deadly like he was a couple years back.
All right, let's take a look over at the prices for the Columbus Crew. We're looking at the most expensive player here being Gyasi Zardes, 9.5. On defense, Harrison Awful, 6.5 is the highest. I was a little surprised that Abubakar was at a 5.5 and not a 6. I do like him as a defensive option. Then Higuain comes in at 9.0, Zach Steffen at 6. So I think these are fair for a lot of the Crew. I'm glad that a lot of them seem pretty decent values overall. What about you guys?
I'm really happy with the Zardes pricing after last season. I think this is the fantasy Crew throwing some shade at him. I mean, he was, 5th highest in goals last year as a player, and he's not in the top 5, 8 in fantasy pricing. He's in that next step down, like the not quite super premium level. Give him a second year with this team. I know there's a few changes, but Merrim's back. If Merrim can get back to the way he was playing with Kamara, we could see Zardes' numbers go up again this year. Massive shade at Zardes from the MLS fantasy Crew, and I can't believe he's at 9.5. That's going to make him an easy must-own early on if they start playing the same way they were last year.
Now, we overlooked one player.
Patrick Mullins.
He's going to be the MVP. 5.5, clearly the best team. But honestly, I think it's absolutely right to look down on the Columbus Crew. I think all of these players are overpriced because we didn't talk about their major addition and subtraction, which is they lost Greg Berhalter and brought in Caleb Porter. So I don't, when we see what Berhalter did for the U.S. men's national team, they're losing that. So I don't see Zardes replicating his production from last year. And they haven't solved the winger problems unless Justin Merrim returns to his form. If that happens, at 7.5, he's great. But if he doesn't, Higuain is getting older, and I don't think they're going to have the same tactical structure. They're going to be a little bit more defensive. So I don't see Zardes getting those same opportunities and shots. And he really needed a lot of a quantity of shots in order to get to his goal tally. And he's just not going to be able to get that from Caleb Porter, from what I can say. So I think there's a real reason why there's underpricing here.
I think age is definitely a very valid point to bring out for this team. Porter, though, also had success when he came to MLS. So you are doubting that the success that he had with Portland, he can bring to Columbus.
Well, I think there's going to be a transition. I think that Columbus, as constructed, was a small market team with players that fit what Berhalter wanted to do. And
Fair.
I don't think that they're going to fit what Porter wants to do. And I think with, the new ownership, and it's not good ownership, but it's new ownership and all the excitement about Save the Crew, I think they're going to be more than happy to let Porter do an adjustment. And so I see Columbus missing the playoffs this year.
Ooh, big take.
Oh, wow.
No. See, I disagree with you on that one. But the big thing too, you don't have Valeri. I mean, he came in to a decently stacked, Caleb Porter came into a decently stacked Portland team, and now you're going. I mean, and I'm not saying Higuain is not good.
That's it. That's the time.
And they lost Valenzuela to injury.
Cut. That is it. Final thoughts on Crew from me, unless these guys disagree. Not a lot has changed on the field except for the age of players. Porter's now back in Ohio, ? We'll see what that means. Definitely some options. Just have to see how the form works out in the end. B-. Maybe generous for Mike.
We should also mention they lose Stefan halfway through the year. So
they do lose Stefan
probably
halfway
going to
through the
be
year.
a cheap goalkeeper, but maybe Ben will change that with the Gold Cup season change.
You see, Bendik and Kempen, we'll mention that really quick. Bendik and Kempen both 4.5, so they both get some time in preseason. Moving on, DC United. Who wants this one? Who hasn't gotten to talk? Blaine, have you done one recently? Or is it Jason's turn?
It's Mike on the list, I think.
It's
if
Mike?
Mike wants to do it.
DC United, Mike?
Sure. I don't think a whole lot has changed for them. I don't think they have a whole lot of big signings. Obviously, the big signing was last year with Wayne Rooney. The big question is whether or not he can go over a full season where he has a lot more away games than he did last year. Another big offseason happening was that they almost lost Lucho Acosta to PSG, which is a crazy thing that I can't believe almost happened. So a big question is going to be his mentality. He and Rooney were such a great partnership at home at Audi Field. I don't know how much that's going to translate. I think they're probably going to be I think we have an inflated sense of them having to go on the road a lot more. I think you get so much momentum when you have that streak of home games.
Yeah.
That you can sometimes buy into it a little bit too much. I also don't know how well Rooney's going to do with all the travel. He didn't really have a whole lot to do last year with the way DC's schedule worked out and the way he came in mid-season. So, but I mean, I think Lucho Acosta at 10.5, I mean, that's a premium price, but he certainly earned it. Rooney at 11, I think that's probably a little high. I think his production is probably going to go down a little bit just because of age. But Knuth, I think, is an interesting defensive midfielder at 7.5. I mean, that's a little bit pricey for a defensive midfielder, but I think, the people who are watching him and the big play your kids advocates really like this kid. So if he gets minutes, I think he's someone to take a look out. I still don't really trust their defense a whole lot because he still has Frederick Brilliant, and I remember him from NYCFC days, and I know enough to avoid him. I mean, Bill Hamid, he's pretty good, but I still just don't trust the defense. And at $6 million for a keeper, I just don't love him. So, offensive attackers don't love their defense as much.
Yeah, I mean, you're right there. Pricing at the defenders, Birnbaum and Jara are both at a 6.0 right there. And it's some reasonable price things, I think, once you get out the top. But I would definitely think that Rooney and Acosta both earned their values right there. Rooney gets that extra 0.5 bump, I say, for being Wayne Rooney. Otherwise, I would see them both reasonably at 10.5 for what they did and how much they played with each other.
Yeah, I think they're both a lock for home games, considering home field advantage there at Audi Field. Little skeptical about the away form again because of the travel and age, but home games, those two, I mean, it's almost like, Almiron and Martinez last year, you always had to get both of them when they're at home. They're just that good at home.
Yeah, definitely. I'll echo some of what Mike said. I don't trust their defense at scoring fantasy points, at least. The defenders on this team are not your big names that you would expect to rack up the points. I mean, Birnbaum's kind of the only guy on the list that's really stood out to me, and he's always been overshadowed by his partner on the fantasy thing. Where I think this defense really shines, though, for fantasy is funneling balls into Bill Hamid. This is not a defense that's designed to really take on attackers and stop them one-on-one. It's designed to funnel them into bad shots or easy shots for Hamid to collect. And I think that could translate to a lot of points for Hamid this year. He's one of the better shot stoppers in the league. And if this defense keeps funneling balls to him like they have in years past when he's been with them, just expect more of the same. He's got that $6 million price point for a reason. And I see good things on those matchups. This is not a defense I'm willing to double up on probably ever this year. But I see him getting the points out of the way this team is built.
Yeah, recoveries has consistently been one of the better stats for predicting high-scoring goalkeepers. Where is your Oreo? Indeed.
Yeah,
I hope I was not the only one who just heard that. We should get them to sponsor the podcast. Yeah, that's
hey, or
that's a lot
Disco, hit us up.
hit us up. We will do that.
I have
double
4
stuffed.
kids now. I need more Oreos.
We'll do a double stuffed MLS fantasy podcast.
Hey.
DC United, my final grade with this. Good options from the first string options. Sorry, good options from the first string players. There we go. But lacking as you get into their defense, just like the real DC, money talks. B-. You will have to pay for those big players. I think that's okay. I think these will be pretty good. I think they'll make the playoffs. I think that Rooney connection and that Acosta connection is still gonna work out for him.
And maybe if Areola could kind of find some form and kind of find a role within that system at 8.5, he could be a cheaper way into offense. But he needs to produce more because last year he didn't really have it.
Steiber at 7. That's some decent stuff right there. All right, Blaine. This time it's actually you. Talk to me about Montreal.
Yeah, Montreal, Piatti's last season with the club, by all reports. This is kind of a winner go home type of thing. He's probably going to another MLS team, which is really going to hurt Montreal fans a lot. And I'm just not seeing all of the big changes we'd want to see, but the East has kind of left them behind after that. There's a couple of really great runs. I mean, they had the CCL run and then the playoff heartbreak loss to Toronto. They seem to have kind of fallen behind a little bit. Piatti and Titer are still your 2 primary playmakers on this team. If those 2 are firing on all cylinders, this team can go a long ways just on them. And they've added a guy who has almost no pressure playing behind them in Maxi Urruti. Big complaint about Urruti down in Dallas was always that he couldn't score the goals when he needed to. He couldn't score the goals to carry the team. Now he's number 2 behind Piatti. He doesn't have to carry the team. So playing without that weight on his shoulders may do a lot of good for him. Coming in at 9.5 on the pricing too, so not terrible. The rest of the team's kind of the same as they were last year. Center backs are making the best of a bad situation. They really haven't been able to lock down a solid pairing since Victor Cabrera dropped off. And, I mean, he's fallen all the way to 4.5 this year. So who knows where they're going to go. Again, Evan Bush is another one of those guys, like I said, with him, he's going to score a lot of points by guys funneling balls into him. He seems to face a lot of shots and make a lot of saves. Gives up a few goals, but he usually picks up a few bonus points when he gives up those multi-goal games. So it kind of works out in the wash a little bit. Other than that, this team, they're definitely in the playoff hunt if they put it all together, but I'd say they're on the outside looking in to start the season.
I was shocked with the pricing of their defenders. 3 of those guys being at 6.0. I just don't they don't jump to my mind as those defensive options. They were okay last year. They had some good runs. But I don't know. Other pricing I think is a lot more on point. Piatti at 11, I think that's very fair. Titer at 10.5, also very fair. The 2 biggest productions for them. Piatti and Azira are both defensive midfielders that I've liked. I liked Azira when he was over at Colorado. It was a very consistent player as far as your points go. Dropped off a little bit when he switched last year, but those are 2 guys, 7.5 and 5.5. Maxi Urruti, you nailed that, Blaine. I think this is a lot better system for him, and that fantasy managers should keep an eye on that. At 9.5, I think that's pretty reasonable for what it could be for him. I don't know. Maybe I'm off with the defense. What do you guys think? Do you think defense when you think Montreal?
Well, no, but I feel like the way, and I mean, we're still digesting the prices upon all the teams, but I kind of feel like with the defenders, it's pretty much if they're starting defender, they're at 6. I mean,
Bakar is 5.5.
He wasn't a consistent starter last year, though.
I mean, is he not going to be
I mean, I don't. But I mean, like, if you're looking at it from the way I think Ben is approaching it, was he a consistent starter? And if he's a consistent starter, then he gets a 6. I mean, that's just like looking over the prices. That's just kind of the impression that I got. I mean, now you can kind of quibble with, is this guy a consistent starter? But at least you can, if there's a question, that goes into the pricing. But it's not necessarily much about the output, especially on the defender end. It's more, are they a consistent starter? What position do they play? And that's, if you know the answer to those 2 questions, I can pretty much tell you what the price is.
But we're going to quibble when we get to New England.
I think you ask if they're a defensive team. I mean, we've known Montreal to be the best counterattacking team in MLS for quite a while. They have been falling off a little bit, but still on the counter, you almost trust Piatti and Titer or whoever has been paired with him to lead that break and go make something happen. And a good counterattacking team starts with the defense. It's just those defenders just don't stand out in your mind. I mean, the guy I remember most is Cabrera, like I said, and he's fallen all the way off. He's not even the starter at this point. They just keep replacing one kind of no-name defender with another one and making it work.
I think that's my problem, because I said defense, not defensive, defenders. Like when you've got Camacho and Lovitz and Senga and some of those guys, it's like, are those really the names that pop into your head when you're like, I need a defender, I'm going to drop 6 on it? Who is it going to be? I think no. That's the time. Let's get my little stop, dismiss. There we go. Ooh, cancel. Timers are hard. Here we go. My final grade for Montreal. Montreal is a who's who of who's that guy again? Most options are centered in midfield, and some of the newer ones are going to be unproven. I give them a C-. Too harsh? No? I don't know. I think it's fair.
I mean, there's no one on that team I'm buying as a Piatti.
There we go. Piatti or Titer. Piatti or Titer. There we go. All right, let's move on to the New England Revolution. Jason.
Yeah, New England, the Patriots just won a Super Bowl, so maybe that'll add some life into the.
We're not
Revolution.
talking about the NFL. No,
that's right.
No, it's New England is.
It'll be a 20-minute rant from me. Stop it.
I think that the Revolution have really been on a downward slide the past couple of years, and even with the addition of Brad Friedel over there, I really don't see that they've done much. All of the speculation and just the cancer that they had last year with Lee Win, and this year now with Diego Fagundes, it just seems like there's something going on in the locker room there. I just don't feel like they've been a cohesive unit last year, and now starting into this year. With that being said, I do think that there are a couple decent options there. Diego Fagundes, he is always a threat, and if he really does want to leave, then maybe he's going to play his heart out and hopefully be able to, get a bigger spotlight on him this year. I think
the Lee Win method worked pretty well for how to get out of New England.
Yeah, it did.
And Fagundes may be a great value for whatever team he actually ends up at 8.
Absolutely. Yep. And I believe they signed Carlos Gil. Is that correct?
They did.
Yeah, I think he could be a really good option too, being $9 million. Obviously, we need to see how he plays a little more in preseason. I do like them, those 2 players. Defensively, I feel like that New England was just a hot melting pot for, hey, who's going to start and then who's going to get a yellow or red card. It was just, was it Anibaba and Dalamea was great until he started really fouling everybody. But, going from last year, I think that Dalamea being priced at 5, that's actually pretty good. And then, Anibaba, when he started, he's at 4.5. So I think that could be two really good ones. I see Juan Agudelo at 6.5. If he can maybe regain his form from a couple years back, I think that could be maybe a good shout at 6.5 if he starts up top. But, really, otherwise, I'm not too thrilled with New England.
Yeah, highest player as far as price goes on a team, Pania, right there, 9.5. Okay, quibble. We're quibbling, Mike. Andrew Farrell. Is he not a starter? 5.5. Should he not be a 6 based on what we were just talking about?
I'm gonna have to go look at his minutes. I thought he got rotated a little bit.
Andrew Farrell.
But he was still consistent.
Andrew Farrell is the face of the defense for the New England Revolution.
He is, yeah.
And sometimes the face of their goal.
Yep, I would say left back, right back, center back, goalkeeper, whatever.
I know he is that. That is it. 5.5.
I think there may be some clean sheet potential coming into these pricings, and Andrew Farrell is not going to benefit from the clean sheets. I mean, if you even go with 1 in 3 games being good for MLS as a starter, I mean that's probably even a little generous. He's 1 in 6, 1 in 7, whereas your premium guys, your guys from Sporting or Seattle, and I know that's next week. But those guys, you're expecting more of the 1 in 3, 1 in 4. You're going to get that price boost from that. This is a 1 in 7, 1 in 8 chance for a clean sheet. So that's hitting this team hard. I got to ask a question, though, with these pricings.
Who is starter when you seem like you get a red card every 5 games? Because I feel like that's Andrew Farrell.
Still a starter.
He would be, but he would be. He's only getting red cards because he's from
But if you miss like a fifth of the game, like, are you really consistent?
He's a Cardinal.
You're still the starter. Yeah, no, I have to ask everybody with this team, when you think of the forwards for the New England Revolution, who's the first guy that comes to your mind?
Nobody.
It's
Brady.
Agudelo.
Tom Brady.
Yeah, Agudelo. I'm a Kansas City guy, so it's Teal Bunbury. Yeah, you look at old ones. I'm trying to find their stats really quick. I don't know who their leading goal scorer was last year, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't Pania, and he is now at 9.5. Yeah, Fagundes.
I think it was. Was it? Was it Fagundes? I thought it was Pania.
If it was like 10, maybe like 10 goals and 11 goals or something, but they were right there next to each other. I know that.
Yeah, it's just he's priced up there so high, and I remember Bunbury taking that stretch and just carrying that team. I don't see the pricing on these guys. Doesn't make sense to me.
Time. We all were tiptoeing around it, but I think my grade is pretty accurate for New England. Preseason has not been kind to them, and neither will I. I mean, they lost 3-0 to Louisville. They did not respect that team. No options, at least at the start of the fantasy season. F. Big ol' F for New England Revolution.
Ouch.
All right. Ouch. I mean, what are we playing with here?
It's fair. It's fair, but ouch.
Here, so there's no option at forward, no option at defense, no option at midfield, no option at goalkeeper that you're going to legitimately consider from New England before anybody else. F.
Pania had 12 goals. Fagundes had 9, by the way.
Bunbury had 11.
There we go. But now we're talking about New York City FC. Mike, get this done.
Okay, I want to introduce you to New York City fandom, because fantasy players are going to have to be New York City fans, because we have 5 double game weeks and they're home double game weeks. So you're going to have to play this team. And that is going to be terrible news for us, because we're going to rotate like hell and frustrate the heck out of all of you.
Who's going to be scoring those goals?
Especially Tim.
That's a great question. We haven't had signed a striker. I think the best case scenario for New York City is that you see the goals kind of spread around. Another question is whether Jonathan Lewis is a starter, whether he's a substitute, whether he's playing time. As of right now, I think he is going to see playing time. I'm not sure whether he's a starter or not. It probably depends if that striker signing gets done before the end of the season. The big new signing for New York City is Matrica, a Romanian from the Romanian league. He scored, I think, in about half of his games in the Romanian league. So I don't know how well that translates to MLS, but he's looked impressive in preseason. Now, granted, it was midseason there, so I don't know how much to trust in that. But I mean, you watch the tape, he reminds you a lot of Raheem Sterling and Giovinco and the way he plays. Whether or not he'll be able to have that production, I don't think so. But can always keep your fingers crossed. But I mean, there's going to be a lot of rotation. We don't know the striker who's going to play in that Villa role. It's either going to be Tati or Medina. I think Tajuri will probably play on the right, but if there is a striker, expect Medina to take his place. On the left, that's where Matriza is probably going to be, but that's also where Lewis is going to play. So if Matriza goes inside, maybe Lewis stays there, maybe Castellanos plays there. Your only real dependable player in the offense is going to be Maxi Morales. He's priced at $11 million, and there's a good reason for that. I think there's going to be a lot of goals, and I think Maxi Morales is going to have a part in that, in most of them. So I think he's going to be someone to look at. When Dome came in, New York City had a great defense. After Dome came in, they didn't. They're losing Angel Herrera. They brought in Keaton Parks, who doesn't have as much of a reputation as a defensive midfielder. That means I think the defensive clean sheet potential isn't going to be there. You're really only looking for offensive hope from Tinnerholm and Moderita. I think Moderita is underpriced at $5 million. I think Dome likes him a lot, and I think you can see him play up top almost sometimes as a forward. He did that a few times last season. If that's the case, we know defenders who play as forwards are going to be great values, so that's someone to look at. Sean Johnson at $6 million, unless it's a great defensive game, I don't think he's going to be worth value because New York City's been playing a lot more recklessly and conceding a lot more goals. They've been doing it in preseason too, so I don't see the clean sheet potential. I think Callens and Chinoa aren't going to be as good this year because of that. So basically, New York City, a lot of goals, going to concede a lot of goals. You're going to want to stick with Maxi Morales and maybe Matriza if he pans out the way New York City thinks they're going to be.
Yeah, there we go. That's basically it. Quick look at the rest of the prices. Like Mike said, Morales at 11. Top three defenders: Callan, Chanot, Tinnerholm, 6.5. Wow, that is a hefty price to have to pay for a defender. Not sure if it's worth it. Maybe going for a Tinnerholm goal as an off chance of that. But yeah, that's some pretty pricey midfielders there as well. Matriza, 10.0. That's, I guess, the gamble that's going to work out for you at the beginning. So that's some question marks there as well.
And he's coming in from midseason, so at least in the first few weeks, it's probably a good bet that, since he's in form and no one else is, that he's going to pick up some points.
That's a good point. I did not realize that. Excellent right there. For me, the grade here, and you guys can keep talking. I'm just going to get this out of the way. Fingers crossed on the forward spot that works out. But I still think even if they're a little bit overpriced, there's some solid options at all the positions. So an A- to NYCFC, New York City FC.
Way too high as the team. I mean, going into the preseason here, coming out of preseason, I would put them on the bubble of not making the playoffs this year. I think your fantasy options are going to come about more because of lack of other options. We're talking about Maxi Morales probably being a must-own because who else is there? Everything's going to run through him. Matriza may end up the same way.
Yeah, I mean, Ring, 8.5 for Ring.
Defensive midfielder, not going to score like that. Like I
double
get
game
it.
weeks.
Yeah, double game weeks, but 8.5 for non-attacking mid.
I think Keaton Parks is going to be your better option. For the double game week, because he's gonna. I think he's gonna win that midfield spot. He's impressed so far, and I think he's been a little bit more of an attacking, which is going to let Ring play more defensively. So I think at 8.5, Ring's not gonna be worth it. Keaton Parks might surprise you.
Very good. Enjoyed that very much. Now let's move on to that other New York team that we have, the New York Red Bulls. So remember how just a second ago I said that New York City FC had defenders that were priced at 6.5? Well, not to be outdone by New York City FC, the New York Red Bulls' top three defenders are priced at $7 million, which I think is absolutely ridiculous for the defense. So I was floored when I saw the prices for those defenders right there. We have a visitor apparently.
Yes, we do. Lily's here. Lily likes the pricing on the New York defenders here.
Lily likes the pricing. Well, I think that's pretty crazy. Not a lot.
Honestly, they're the only good defensive team in the league.
That's true. No, I mean this is well justified. Long, Murillo, Parker.
So, yeah, you're talking to an SKC guy over here. I like to hear his
We
rebuttal.
are talking about the Eastern Conference. Thank you very much.
No, seriously, this defensive unit has got to be the deepest in the league right now, top to bottom.
Yeah.
We got rid of Ike Opara. That's a big hit. I like the guys coming up behind him, but still, this unit over time and with the way Kansas City dropped off last year, if you had to put, I'd say top 3 teams in the league on defense over the last 3-4 years, Kansas City's floating up there, Red Bulls are floating up there, and Seattle's your third one. Seattle kind of dropped off early last year. Kansas City had that run.
Seattle
where they
always drops off early every year.
Yeah, but I mean their defense. But last year was even worse for their defense, and then Kansas City dropped off last year. Red Bulls have a claim to the best defense in the league right now, and the prices are justified on.
Oh
this
no,
one.
I totally think. I mean, and then Lawrence at 6.5. I think is fine too.
To Reed's point, I do think that the pricing doesn't take into consideration maybe enough in our preseason expectations the loss of Tyler Adams. I think he did a lot more for that defense, even though he was a midfielder that people aren't taking into consideration. And I think that's going to have a domino effect all across. There's not nearly anyone in their academy who's going to replace him. It's not like when they got rid of Dax, everyone was like, oh, Tyler Adams, this kid is coming up. I mean, they've got a kid who's going to take that place, but there's nowhere near the hype. I mean, that kid just stepped into a Bundesliga team and is kicking ass over there. I don't think he's going to stay in Leipzig for very long. He's before other clubs, big clubs in Champions League, are going to be really looking for him. I think that's going to be a big loss offensively and defense for the Red Bulls. They're still going to be the best defense. They're probably going to be one of the best clean sheet chances you get. So I get the $7 million pricing because they're pretty much going to punish you for that easy clean sheet hunting. That's just the way the prices have been working under this system, but be cautious about that.
The big gap that I see for the Red Bulls going forward, and that's what factors into some of my grade for them, is that midfield. Because we all know Kaku was restless, to say it nicely, during preseason here. And he's really the big standout that they have. He's $9 million, the most expensive midfielder they have. After that, you've got Sean Davis and Daniel Royer at 7.5, and then Florian Velo at 7.5 as well. So there's a big drop off there for what these guys provide. Yeah, Royers has some good elements to him. Bejancourt's had some good times last year as well. Mule had some good games, but no one with that consistency of Kaku, no one with the consistency as Morales with New York City there. So I think that's really where they're weak now, especially with that big loss to the midfield they've already suffered. So good defense, still got BWP, questionable midfield for me, and so that gives me a B+. That's what I'm going for. B+ right there. So there you go, Mike. You guys are better than New York.
I mean, you're better. We are New York. I don't know what you're talking about.
You are New York.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how Valo does coming back from injury after last year. And then you mentioned it, whether Kaku's head is going to be in the right place. Because if they don't have Kaku in the right place and motivated, they may be in some trouble getting to BWP.
Maybe Wall Street helps set these prices some, maybe for the defense. All right, finish that one early. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I caught myself last year saying, pick the starter in the midfield. And I'm seeing all these guys priced at 7.5. And I know Royer threw out some monster games last year. Davis had his moments where he threw out a pretty big game. There's some strategy here, but if you can pick the right weeks and you know this team well, you can grab some massive points at a discount with a guy like Royer if you know what weeks to get him. And I think they priced him that way where you're going to see some really monster round scores because people have utilized these guys like Royer at the right time.
And one thing to keep in mind about that, this is another CCL team. Like Atlanta, they're going to be going hard. So you're going to see some of the cheaper players getting starts and minutes that they may not otherwise. And unlike a lot of other teams in MLS, their B team can actually beat a lot of MLS's A team. So you could see some really good value options here. I think Red Bulls, maybe some good options for switcheroo candidates in the early weeks when you're just desperate for budget.
Yeah, for really good for triple switcheroo. I couldn't agree more, Mike.
That's ridiculous. All right, Jason, we'll let you talk some. Orlando City SC. There we go. There's Ben's SC right there. What do you think about them?
Dumpster fire still.
So you're gonna summon Guy Sanchez and talk about this one?
Yeah. It's sorry to all my Orlando friends out there, but you guys are a dumpster fire. The only positive that I've seen in the past, I don't know, 3 months is the signing of Danilo Acosta from Real Salt Lake as a left back. I think he's been a very bright spot in the preseason so far. It looks great. I do think Tesho could be a good possible option at forward at 6.0, 6 mil, maybe partnered up top with Dom. I'm curious to see if Orlando is going to play a 4-4-2 diamond like Christ used to do. I know with the recent signing of Nani, big hype around his name, but I don't know how he's going to A, fit in, or B, really fit in. I just don't see much change from last year. Kleshtin, priced at 8.5. I think that's overpriced. I really don't think that his production dropped off quite a bit last year. Some of the options I do like though is Chris Mueller at 6.5. He does tend to play out of position up top, either striker or right winger. I think that could be a good possible bang for your buck there. I do not like anybody on defense or in keeper. I really think that they're going to be very leaky in the back like they were last year. So I just don't see much changing with Orlando. I think that they're probably going to finish near the bottom of the table again like they did last year. Not a lot of hope for them in my eyes.
Yeah, no, I think you got that. Let's look at the prices real quick. Similar to Cincinnati, most expensive player 9.0. That's Dom Dwyer, the forward there. You've got Sasha Kleshin 8.5, Higuita 6.5, Mueller 6.5. Who else we got here? Most expensive defender is 5.5. So, is there anything else we can say about Orlando, guys?
Starting keepers at 4.5. Decent for a keeper-oo if you want to try it.
If you want to try it, that's the key point there, and that's what factors most into my grade. Orlando seems to be where good players go to die. They have recognizable names, and they just don't produce. If C's get degrees, then Orlando must be sitting backwards at their desk. F.
But Orlando is one of those teams that always starts off hot. So if they get a home game, and especially in the beginning of the year, it's hard to make the budget for a keeper-oo. Take a shot.
I have not looked at their schedule enough to know if an Orlando home game early on is something that would be. That's probably what's going to happen. Is it's going to be Orlando home to New York is what's going to be.
Well, first game is Orlando home to New York City.
Well, there we go. See, I guess
I fully expect to see a keeper in your first 3 weeks, Mike. Otherwise, you're a liar.
With Orlando.
Yes, with Orlando.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're just done with that.
If you go the pick against New York City strategy, which usually works out well for me, maybe.
All right. Blaine, you want to talk about Philadelphia for us?
Yeah, Philadelphia is one of those teams that they traded away a few players. They traded away all their draft picks this year. I think their top price guy comes in at 8.5, if that tells you how the MLS fantasy crew values this team. And that's Sergio Santos, who's a newcomer as a forward. It's going to be really hard to see how they're going to turn this around and right the ship here. They spent some money on some different guys at different times, brought in CJ Sapong, paid out a little bit for him, but they've been trying to build a team with MLS castoffs or guys that have been making their mark as a second player and turn them into a primary player. David Accom's another one for that one. And I know, Jay, you talked about him all the time when he was with Chicago. He's priced at $6 million this year.
Yep.
He scored like one goal last year.
Their defensive mid is tied for their second highest priced player, and that's Harris Badudjanin.
Who's good?
Yeah, he's good, but he's tied for your second highest priced player. I'm surprised there's not a defender in the top 5 with the way this team's going, but they traded him all away.
And it's weird because they're doing a whole new tactics this year because I think they're moving to the press.
That's right.
Possession. I don't know if they really have the personnel for that. It doesn't seem like they brought in the personnel for that. So I don't know if Jim Curtin is the coach to teach that. I don't know why all of a sudden he's doing a whole new system by himself, but maybe it works. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think that Medud, or how you say his name,
Medunjanin.
We're back in
Medunjanin.
season 4.
Yeah, exactly. I think that he was one of the high scores because he was on most corners and set pieces, which makes him great, a great asset. At 8.0, I think that that's probably at the highest price point that you could really put him at. But I think we're all overlooking somebody who was a newcomer last year that did really well, and it's Corey Burke. He did really well up top. At 8.0 or 8 million, I think that he could be possibly a pretty good shout. If David Accam does start for a $6 million punt, I would take that in a heartbeat because he can be an extreme game changer, when he comes on either as A, super sub, or B, starting with his speed. But, again, his head needs to be in the right place as well. I don't really like any of the defensive options on here. But, Medunjanin and Accam and Burke, I think, are going to be your three if you are looking at anybody.
I'm surprised, Blaine, you didn't mention Aurelian Colin.
He's at 4.5. He's brought in as a stopgap just to kind of fill it in. I believe he could be a starter, but the way this team's built, and I think from preseason, he is not one of their starters at this time. But again, they've got two defenders on the roster at 5.5, and everybody else is at 4.5. So you've got some cheap defensive options if you need them, or just need a starter who's going to hopefully give you 2 points and a bonus point and only lose one for goals allowed.
But let's be real. If Colin starts, he's going to be the ultimate troll this year. He's going to be the first MLS player ever to go below 4.0 with all the red cards he's going to get.
Ouch. Ouch.
And we should mention, I think the reason that Burke isn't priced very high is because they lost Doshkal.
Yep.
His loan expired.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
And before they had him, they were garbage offensively. When I think now they don't have him. I think they're back to that same position.
Yeah,
his loan expired, and he does not fit in the press style. So
yeah,
and I think he
didn't re-up
better.
He does. He should have. Yeah, someone should have got him. Cincinnati should have got him. He's kind of defensive kind of guy. Maybe we can make him be that way. We could just say he is. Yes, Bushkel is a defender. Get him. Bring him. Where was I? Oh yeah. So my grade: Philly had a good thing going last year, but now they're looking to switch things up. Mixed results in preseason leave me worried. D+. Right there. Sorry about that. Final team in our Eastern Conference preview. Mike, talk about Toronto.
Well, Reed, I know you're really sad that Giovinco is no longer going to be available for you to pick. I know he was a mainstay of your team last year. So, maybe you just need to let the last 5 minutes just be a moment of silence for the loss of Giovinco and the many fantasy memories he gave us. The many times that he scored hat tricks when we captained him. We will miss him.
Sure.
One of the big additions they have is Laurent Simon. He's priced at 6. I think he's pretty good. I think he'll help shore up their defense. But I don't know that replaces the loss of Vazquez and Giovinco. Now, as of the time we're recording this, they're fighting for various DPs. They're also going to be contending for CCL. But unlike last year, I don't think they're that serious a contender to go very far in the tournament. Without Giovinco, without Vazquez. So I can see offensively them losing a lot, especially, Josie Altidore. I don't think he's going to get the service, and he's also going to get a lot more attention because there's not going to be as many people to distract as when he was with Giovinco. I think we've been, if you're a long-time listener to this podcast, you know that Josie with Giovinco is a lot better than Josie without Giovinco. So I think your value is going to be more on the defense here. Players like Simon, Drew Moore at 5 million. I think he can be good, although maybe I don't know if he's a locked-on starter. We'll kind of have to see what they want to do if they want to stick with the 3-man back line that they had last year, or if they kind of change it up with the new personnel. The good thing is with CCL, at least we'll get some good samples and starting lineups for that. But I mean, I really think your only value is going to be on the defensive end. Michael Bradley at $9 million for a mid is a ridiculous price point if you want to get into that. I mean, I think he's just a defensive mid, so I would never pick him unless he was on a double game week. And at $9 million, I would never pick him.
Name recognition right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the USMT upcharge there. So
Jonathan Osorio, $10 million, most expensive player on the team, possibly worth it. He really had a great season.
I think if he fills in for the number 10 role, I think that he could be a really good option there. I know it's 10 million is creeping up there, but I think he could be really good. And we haven't even talked about Terrence Boyd, who maybe hasn't been in the limelight, the past 5 years, but at 6.0, I think that he could be a possible good flyer because, like you mentioned, Mike, that when Josie's up top, and without Giovinco, he gets double teamed or he just gets all that attention, leaving Boyd or Hamilton or whomever's up top wide open. So I think that Terrence Boyd could be a pretty good option, barring injury and things like that at his price.
Yeah. This is I remember Toronto FC from Kansas City's Eastern Conference days before they splashed some money. They were hot garbage, bottom of the league every year, and it seems like they're sliding right back to that. I was just spot checking some of the numbers while you guys were doing this. Their fourth highest player is 7.0, and that's Marco Delgado. And he's been okay most of the time. He's always been kind of one of those fringe players. If you don't have the budget for somebody else, you grab him. It almost feels like that price is there because they have to have at least 4 players at the 7.0 or higher mark on every team. Every other team has at least 4, and I can kind of justify the 7.0 mark for all of their guys at the bottom of that are just kind of barely eking into that. But this team price average is abysmal. Osorio is probably a 9.0, a 9.5 guy. Altidore, I thought would be a little higher just because he's a forward with the national team tag. But it seems like even their top playmakers are overpriced at this point for what we can expect from this team. Dumpster fire, definitely a lock to miss the playoffs this year.
Blaine thinks everyone is missing the playoffs this year.
It's just going to be Sporting Kansas City in the playoffs.
I mean, we're talking about the Eastern Conference here. Like
nobody from the East makes the conference. Nobody.
Sporting Kansas City completes the whole Eastern Conference.
I mean, I can give them to you. I said Atlanta would go. Columbus goes. DC goes, as we're going through the list from here. Red Bulls, I said New York City's probably out, but now that I might have to reconsider because everybody else just seems
because he's running out of teams.
It's just gotten worse. Like,
well, and that's the thing. We didn't even talk about New York City dealing with and New York Red Bulls having coaches that are brand new coaches from midseason last year. Atlanta, Columbus having new coaches. I mean, there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of big questions. So, I mean, maybe there's an opportunity for one of these teams in the East to kind of surprise. If Sasha Kleshin were to remember that he's Sasha Kleshin, I could see Orlando pushing itself. Something we haven't mentioned for, foreign fantasy players who follow us from EPL, there's now 7 playoff spots in MLS. So the format of playoffs have changed, but obviously that's going to make a difference in the way teams play. There's not going to be 2 legs in the playoffs anymore, so seeds are going to be more important, but there are 7 seeds of them now. So I think how that plays out in the season will be a big question and how it affects rotations for us.
All right, guys, thank you so much for going over all these teams. I hope everyone listening found that helpful, especially new players who are coming in. I know when we're talking with Ben, we do focus on a lot of some of the maybe the insider stuff, the name of the show. But we do also want to help the new players as well. And I hope this breakdown helps for a lot of the new people who are listening, fingers crossed, to the show today. Our final plugs, and then we'll get out of here and get ready for our Western Conference preview next week. That's the first plug. Western Conference preview, fantasy preview, next Monday, the 25th. So stay tuned for that. That one's going to drop at our regular time. MLS Fantasy Boss team previews are already popping up on the website, so check on those if you have not already. That's also going to be reposted on Reddit into the appropriate team forum and at r/fantasy MLS. Speaking of r/fantasy MLS, that is the official fantasy community for this podcast and just fantasy in general. Head over to there if you want to be a part of one of the best, if not the best, fantasy community on the interwebs. You can also find information for the MLS Fantasy Boss network of leagues and how to join. So this podcast, MLSFI, MLSFantasyBoss.com, and r/Fantasy MLS will all have leagues. They will also all have prizes. So if you want a chance to win cool swag like the glasses back there, not this hat, but scarves, which you can see back there. This whole video thing is pretty fun. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm sorry. You should check us out on YouTube. You have a chance to win that, stickers and everything like that. So we'll have prizes. You can get scarves, gift cards, MLS. So it'll be lots of good time. Check that out for the way to join, so that I will actually let you win, because you got to give me some information. And finally, Skylar and I are going to be having preview articles this year. Check those out over at MLSsoccer.com. That's the plugs I have, guys. Anything you want to mention?
Yeah, I'm going to mention, I'm not doing the injury news account, but what I will do is if I see an injury news, I'm going to retweet it with the hashtag MLS injury news. I would invite you to do the same. That way we'll all have one hashtag to do a quick search and find it. So even though I'm stepping back from it, we can all kind of do it and keep track of it. And I'll still give the injury news stuff on the podcast, although I'm not following beat writers, because following beat writers hurt my soul. So.
What did Madame Serrano hurt your feelings?
No, it's just they stopped providing injury information and started tweeting more about politics, and I just was done with it.
Well, my only plug is going to be, I'll be on here as much as I possibly can. I am expecting a baby girl here. No. Really, Mike? Come on. I'll be expecting a baby girl here in exactly 4 weeks. So I will try to make it work as best as I can to be back as much as possible. It's not really a plug, but yeah.
That's okay. I mean, it's your official announcement.
Yeah.
Speaking of baby girls, I want to thank my wife for taking care of mine. I have a month-old right now, so thank you, Shannon. Taking care of little Gemma. And Lily's here.
Yeah, Lily's here. No real plugs from me. I've got a 20-month-old sitting on my lap. She's been beating on the door to try to get in tonight. She likes to spend time with me, so I'm going to try to get back to writing regularly for Fantasy Boss this year and get something out every week. But I've got a fun little one who wants to play all the time, so my time online is probably going to be a lot more limited. But I'm still here with you guys in spirit, and I will constantly be playing and throwing out updates as I can. And I'm going to keep trying to do the podcast. We may be trying to do a Lily picks this year, too. She picked a few captains last year and did really well, so we may keep up with the Lily picks.
All right. Well, stay tuned for that and more on the MLS Fantasy Insider. And don't forget our Western Conference previews next week. Thank you very much, and good luck.